Rambo, a well-known franchise that has a lot to say, but do we have a lot to say about it? Let's rank stuff, episode 5, Rambo edition. I am Henry Confidential, and that is my co-host Austin Pez. How Austin? I want to really do an introduction with you on this one because you're the reason that we're even talking about the Rambo franchise. Because I would say about 3 months ago, if you would ask me to do this, obviously we'd have a show. But if you would have asked me to do this, I'd be like, no way in hell, because I only seen
Well,
First
first
Blood.
we'd have to invent a show to do it for, and then we would actually do it. Yes.
Exactly. But at the time, I'd only seen, ironically, First and Last Blood and didn't like either. But I've done a rewatch of those two now. Plus, I've seen 2 and 3, plus Rambo. And now I have a full-fledged opinion of the franchise, which I'll get into in a minute. But
Nice.
Let's start off with you. What is your general thought process when it comes to the Rambo franchise? We'd already talked about Rocky, so clearly we like Stallone. Does Rambo hold up in terms of Rocky? Is it one of the reasons that it's Stallone's one of your favorite actors? Is one of your favorite action franchises? How does it hold up, just generally speaking?
Yeah, Stallone. If anybody watched our tournament fights battles that we did a while back of my 16 favorite actors, Stallone is in there. Like I genuinely think he's an actor with a lot to say. He comes up with some good performances a lot of times out of nowhere, and I think some of that, the Rambo character, as much as people like to think of it as just this run and gun, action, shoot everybody in sight franchise, if you really dig into the character and some of the philosophies and stuff going on here, with the POW mindset, with the PTSD, a veteran out of his element, in regular society, things like that. There's really a lot going on with the character, and I think Sylvester Stallone as an actor was really able to dig into something, and it was something different than he had ever done. It was a different character than the Rocky character, which was just kind of a this underdog kind of street level, just guy boxer just trying to survive. And this guy, Rambo, is a different guy, kind of trying to survive in his own way, not only in jungles or deserts or wherever he may find himself, but just trying to survive essentially his own mind, and then trying to overcome the thoughts that kind of plague him. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think I grew up a little bit more with the Rocky franchise because they were on TV more. Now, I did see a lot of these on TV growing up, on cable, as a lot of people did. But oddly enough, just because of how old I am, I wasn't born till '86. So the first one I saw in the theaters was Rambo 2008 at a midnight show. So, I mean, obviously that's the first one I've ever seen theatrically. I've never been able to catch First Blood or any of those like in a re-release or like a Fathom events or anything like that. I've just never been able to catch anything like that. But yeah, I would say I'm a bigger Rocky fan overall, but it doesn't mean that the Rambo franchise isn't any less interesting or something you can dig into.
Yeah, absolutely. And similar to what you were just talking about with the Stallone thing, the more I watch Stallone movies, the more I realize that this guy is actually, starting to become one of my favorite actors. It's, he's not as dumb and over the top as, kind of the stigma was about him and, Arnold Schwarzenegger, for all their movies. Don't get me wrong. They don't have, the most intellectual movies as a whole, but they got some stuff to say in both of them. So it's now that I'm really going in, I'm really trying to, broaden my horizon. Stallone is really getting up there. So it's one of those that once you get over the accent and just, his voice and the fact that he just utilized that to his own characters, he tweaks it in a little bit for each of his characters. So it's not just, stale and not just the same. So yeah, this is a franchise. When I first watched First Blood a couple years ago, I was like, I was expecting like the traditional Rambo stuff that is
Well,
meme.
that's what everybody expects
Yeah,
when they don't know the franchise. You go into the first one, you're going like, "What's this weird movie about?" There's just this guy going through this town, and then getting run off by the locals, and being harassed, and running off into the woods, and kind of setting up traps, and just making the stand. And it's like, I think what people think of when they think of the Rambo character is stuff like First Blood Part 2 or Rambo 3, where it's like him in a helicopter, or him with a big giant machine gun, or him, camouflaging himself and stabbing dudes, things like that. That's what they think of, but that's not where the character started. And especially with David Morrell, who wrote the original First Blood book, that the character is kind of based on. That's not what that thing is all about. That's just kind of what evolved out of it later, because it
yeah,
was the 80s. If it's the 80s, you had to go big with the action eventually. And we've
absolutely.
seen that with both Schwarzenegger and Stallone. So that's just kind of where it evolved to. Not to say that they're not enjoyable. I'm sure we'll talk about it. But, the Rambo franchise, yeah, definitely started one way and kind of finished another way. But we'll talk about that as we get into the movies. But it's an interesting franchise to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. And as Chris in the comments say,
Mhm.
powerful character. Yeah, he's got a lot
Yeah,
to
yeah.
say. So yeah, just to finish off what I was saying. So when I went in, I wasn't understanding the concept that this is a character, with PTSD and he's going through his
Mhm.
emotions. And like I said, I just really wasn't in the right mindset when I watched it. So my memory of it for a long time, I was like, I don't really want to watch this. So when you recommended Rambo 2008 for a best action movie of the 2000s, I had to watch that for the first time. And then that gave me, I was like, I saw the Rambo movies on sale on my Vudu. So I was like, sure, I'll buy them all. So I bought them all.
Mhm.
And then I watched Rambo just because I wanted to just watch that one and prep for our debate. And I was like,
Right.
I don't hate it as much as I assumed I thought I hated First Blood. So then I gave First Blood another chance, and then I watched 2 and 3 for the first time. And then I had actually,
Mhm.
fun fact, I had seen Last Blood, around the time it came out in 2019, just because I was trying to watch
Mhm.
movies, and with no context of the character outside of First Blood, I despised it.
Right.
So I just did a rewatch of that today, and we'll see if my
Yeah.
opinion changes. So with that
Right.
said, we will go
Mm.
into our top 5, starting at number 5, and I will start. And as I try and say all the time, I try and give a little bit of context to my rankings by giving my rating as well as how it compares into the other ones rating wise. This is the only one that I actually think is rotten, a 2 out of 5 stars. So the only reason I think so is just because honestly it was boring, and that is Rambo 2. This is
Hmm.
a movie that I feel like I'm going to be in a disagreement with you and just the general audience, but this is one where I feel like they were trying to meet in the middle of what we eventually get in Rambo 3 and also have something to say similar to Rambo 1. And I think it's just missing the mark. Because it goes into the war aspect with the was he a colonel or I don't remember exactly what his ranking is, but the military officer that kind of like brings him in and like they
Troutman.
yeah,
Yeah, Colonel
they develop
Troutman.
yeah, they
Yeah.
develop a good relationship that you really get overall for the franchise. But like it's trying to combine the combination of the John Rambo character from the first one while blending into the action star, like you were saying with the 80s, how it's kind of mesh.
Mhm.
And I just feel like it doesn't lean either way enough that really makes when it does do one or the other as interesting and as compelling. So I don't think it's like technically bad in terms of like over the top cheese, bad action. It's got some fun stuff, but in terms of like the entire movie within the franchise, it just stands out the least for me. And I was like, by the end, I was like, I don't really care about what's going on and the twists and turns that it's trying to go with. Like I said, it's kind of you know leaning in a little bit with the PTSD, with the military stuff, with the betrayal, with the sense of heroism. It tries to do a little bit too much, and I feel like it
Mhm.
really leans more into 3, which why it's going to be higher, obviously at some point. So I feel like it commits to it later on. Whereas in this one, I feel like it's just got its feet a little bit too much. So is it a movie you can talk about yet, or not yet?
Not yet. I've got mine a little bit higher, but yeah, I do have a higher opinion of it, but mainly because I think it does obviously a fairly good job of blending all the different Rambo elements, as far as like the first blood aspects, the over the top kind of action aspects, and still kind of digging into some of the stuff he's dealing with, as far as his memories of the Vietnam War and the fact that he both blames himself for not winning the war and kind of his superiors and the bureaucrats and things like that, and the politicians. But he feels like he was not allowed to win a war. He felt he could have, and he's trying to get a redemption of sorts in going in and finding these POWs who are still in there, that the government kind of doesn't want people to know about. And he feels like if he can get in there and do that, it can give him sort of a peace of mind. I just like that aspect of it. I like the setup. It may seem a little cliche. Oh, he's going in to get his old buddies, or not necessarily his old buddies, but you know what I mean, like his fellow, soldiers. I just like the setup of that, and the fact that there's one line where he asks Troutman, can I win this time? And he goes, that's up to you. And he finally has this sense of like, you know what, maybe I can do it. If I can do it, I can do it. And that kind of sets him free to do his thing. But I'll talk a little bit more about that movie
And
in a minute.
the last thing I'll say on that is when I went and read my review, I literally say it was just kind of summarize what I said, but then the last line I was like, just on first watch. So maybe I either just didn't get it, similar to Rambo 1, whereas in like Rambo 3, Last Blood, and Rambo, where it's a little more straightforward in just its overall narrative, but 1 and 2 are trying to be complex. So maybe I just didn't get it on the first rewatch, but that's why it's where I'm at right now, and I didn't go back to it because I was pretty set in stone. I was like, it's just, it is what it is. So let's hear your number 5.
Okay, my number 5, ironically enough, it fits the name. Rambo Last Blood is in last place for me. And to me, my main reason is that it just doesn't feel like a Rambo movie. It feels like a Sylvester Stallone action movie where he didn't need to be the Rambo character in this sort of family-oriented him versus these drug cartel trafficker guys. It feels like one of those Liam Neeson movies or something, like recently we've been getting, where he like gets tangled up into something. I don't like Rambo Family Man. I don't think it fits the character, of him being like this uncle to this niece or whatever, and trying to be like this mentor character to these teenagers, these kids. Like it doesn't feel right. It's just something about it. I don't even know if it's just the fact that he doesn't look anything like the Rambo character in that, which it may seem like a stupid reason, but to me that's kind of part of the character. So it kind of takes me out of the movie a little bit. But him just being this like farm guy and getting tangled up in the situation, the fact that he gets his ass kicked for most of the movie feels out of place as well, up until about the last 10-15 minutes. It's just the whole thing seems out of place. It's an unnecessary film. The film as a whole is unnecessary. And I'll talk about this a little bit more when I get to the fourth film, but I feel like where that one left off was just such a perfect note that this is one where I didn't need Stallone to go back to this character. Like, I think this character was fine being left where he was. I don't understand his reasoning for going back to it with this particular story. It doesn't add anything to the mythology of Rambo. It doesn't add anything to his character development. To me, it just feels unnecessary. I don't think Last Blood works overall just as a Rambo movie, which is why it's last in this Rambo franchise. For me, it just doesn't work as a Rambo film. Not to say it doesn't have fun moments. I mean, you can have fun when he's in his little underground tunnels under the farm, setting booby traps and Home Alone traps, and trapping dudes by their feet and stabbing them, and for God's sakes, he literally does a Mortal Kombat fatality to the main guy at the end of the movie, like the whole just like pinning the dude up against the thing I mean, it's fun. You have a smile on your face, but it's just the whole thing just feels like a wash. I don't know why it was necessary. There's a reason why people have kind of forgotten that this existed and kind of brushed it under the rug, at least in my opinion. But yeah, Rambo Last Blood is in last place for me.
There you go. I'll talk about it in a little bit. So I'll let you go double up and do your number 4 as well.
Sure. My number 4 is going to be Rambo 3.
That's also Rambo my number 4, so we can knock.
Okay, so we can talk about it. Yeah. And this is one of the ones, along with I rewatched parts 2 and 3 for this one, because they were the two I had not seen in the longest, that I had not revisited in a very, very long time. and again, it's not bad. It's funny, people make this one out to be like the worst one. I'm not really sure why. Other than the fact that the actual subject matter has not aged well as far as the
Yeah,
setup,
yeah, with the
and that's the
storytelling and
main.
all
It
that stuff.
seems to be the main problem as far as the structure of the film is that the setup is literally Rambo working with the Mujahideen in Afghanistan against the Russians. Granted, if you put it in context of the time, there was a real Afghanistan Russian, ground guerrilla war, almost similar to Vietnam, where these Afghanistan people were fighting off the Russians invading their homeland. I get that, but the fact that it developed into essentially what is modern day Al Qaeda does not look good on the film. And Rambo working with them and the film being dedicated to those freedom fighters of Afghanistan certainly does not help. But if you can set that aside, I still do enjoy the environment they set him in because we had never seen him in sort of a desert
Yeah,
environment, which is interesting. So it's not like him being able to blend in with a
it's
jungle
beautifully
or him being
shot. A
able
lot of
to.
a
Oh
wide
yeah,
angle.
it's and given the fact that if you see any of the behind the scenes of the movie, there was an original director who was fired. The guy who actually directs it was like a second unit director for the other movies, who took over. There was a different director of photography that came on. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that actually is pretty beautifully shot. They used a lot of the, I think they filmed most of it actually in like Israel and Arizona and things like that. But it's still very well shot. The action is still good. I mean, when they do it, it's very, very well done
Yeah,
and well staged. I mean, there's plenty of explosions and gunfire. I think at the time it had the highest body count ever. At the
yeah.
time in 1988, it was like 107 or something, something nuts. But yeah, I mean, you still get everything you would want in Rambo action as far as him sneaking around, setting traps, doing his thing, fighting these Russians, which is it was around the time of the Cold War, so he's fighting Russians. It's kind of like Indiana Jones fighting Nazis. It's fine, for the time doing his thing.
Exactly.
So I'm okay with that. But yeah, because we got a little bit of that in part two, which we'll get to in a little bit, kind of tacked on, which felt a little weird. But yeah, like it's not bad overall. I just don't think it does again when the ones that are higher up on my list really do something to explore the character. I don't think a lot of there's not a new character beats in this one. It's just him going after Troutman, which is his buddy, which is fine, but he's kind of the MacGuffin of the movie is Colonel Troutman. So,
Yeah, and
you know,
I think what separates 3 and 2 for me is the reason why this is my 4 and 2 is this is
mhm,
at least with this one I can turn my brain off and just have a lot of fun. And because it's beautifully shot, it's not just dumb
mhm,
action. It's actually like well thought out and choreographed. And like you said, it may not hold up for like today's day and age in terms of the background of the context of the
mhm,
story, but you're able to like really have a full-fledged Rambo at that point. Like he starts off, cockfighting and stuff and like kind of just,
mhm,
being a badass. I literally wrote that in my review and I'm like, this is the Rambo that I'm thinking of when I close my eyes and I'm like, what is Rambo like? He is yoked. Like at this point, like, as someone who likes the gym stuff, when you see Stallone, like, through the years
dude,
of
he is
starting to
so
get shredded.
shredded in this
Yeah, yeah.
movie. He's like 3% body fat in this movie. It's
Well,
it's
you got to
insane.
remember he's doubled down on the Soviets around this time, so
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh yeah.
he really got beef with the Russians. So like
Uh,
he's more than just the front. Like when there's multiple shots where he turns around and his back is just wide and thick, and you're like, yeah,
mhm,
he really is like I'm developing this character. So I feel
mhm,
like at this point he had an idea of what he was going for, and I really feel like that's why I connect with this one more than 2 was because 2, like I said, you're kind of like mixing back and forth of what you're really trying to figure out what sticks, whereas in this one, no, dumb action crazy, hey, let's have a little bit of a reason why we're going to do this and we're just going to go balls to the wall and have a blast. And I'm like, hey, I don't think it's like the greatest movie of all time by any means, but when I was reading reviews I was like, I don't agree with what these people are saying. Like I genuinely think that this is some fun action. Like it's a weird comparison, but like when you think of like the first Transformers, why people give the first Transformers compared to the other Transformers movies
mhm.
slack, because it's dumb fun, but it's fun. You know what I mean? And like that's what Rambo 3 is. It's dumb fun technically, but it's actually
Yeah.
fun. It's not just, nonsense and craziness just for the sake of it. Like there's a reason. You may not connect with that reason, but there's at least a coherent like reason why they're doing what they're doing. Like I said, the Troutman stuff, you really, it really develops that and it builds it up. And like, except by the end, it doesn't have, the payoff as much as you would want, but at least leading up to it, it kind of, goes there and you feel
Mhm.
the reason why Rambo is, on edge and he's really going crazy. So I had a lot of fun with it, and I was really surprised. And especially in comparison to two, maybe it was a good reason for me personally why if I'm gonna go in with this type of action franchise, this is what I want. So I got no problem with that.
Well, and at the time, if you go back and look at the Siskel and Ebert review, I think it was like gave him a thumbs up and one thumbs down. But even the one that gave, I can't remember if it was Siskel or Ebert, but the one that gave a thumbs up said, "Listen, is it a masterclass in cinema? No, but are Rambo fans going to enjoy the shit out of this movie, essentially? Like, yeah. Like Rambo fans are going to get what you want. It's Rambo doing his thing. I mean, it does have one of my favorite Rambo moments where he has to where he uses like the gunpowder shit to plug his own wound, and that shoots like the fire all the way through like his torso. It's like, oh, that's brutal. It just makes me cringe, like just thinking about how painful that was. But like, it just shows how cool Rambo is and how like the character, he knows what he's doing, but also he's not invincible. He gets hurt and he has to deal with stuff. So yeah, and I think this one was also just a chance to show that Troutman was also genuinely kind of a tough guy too. He was able to withstand torture, and he wasn't just a fluke. Yeah, he's an older dude, but like he's able to hold his own.
That he taught Rambo pretty much everything he knows.
Yeah. You believe that maybe back in the day, if he was maybe 30 years younger, he could be fighting right alongside Rambo, kicking ass. Absolutely, you know what I mean? Just like right beside him. So and I like Richard Crenna a lot. I think he really embraces that role, especially in the earlier films. So it's good stuff. But overall, yeah, again, not horrible. I don't think it's as bad as people make it out to be. It's just my number 4, just because I like franchises, entries in this franchise a little more than this one. That's all.
There you go. And we're going to go to my number 3 because you had already talked about it, and that is Last Blood. So the reason that Last Blood is my number 3 and not Dead Last or even 4 is because I kind of like the aspect of giving Rambo the humanity of caring for this girl like a daughter, where it's like, don't get me wrong, you technically don't connect to it on like a literal level of like why, like where does this relationship grow from? But you could just feel it in his performance and his eyes that like he believes it. So it's one of those where you're like, he's telling me that I love this girl and I'm doing this for her, and you believe it. You know what I mean? There's something about it where Stallone's performance, he does a really good job of like having that humanity. I really feel like he's going through that stretch of like, after Creed and Creed 2, where he's like, aging in his character of Balboa and like being the mentor, that just Stallone as a person, he's kind of trying to turn around, because he's still got the expendable stuff like in the background as well, so he's still able to do his dumb whatever. But like with this one, I feel like he's really trying to give his John Rambo character an arc, and kind of like have the send off of like, hey, at this point I'm only putting myself in situations where my skills, are being utilized, as if I'm kind of forced into it. And, I like the concept of the girl, where it's like I said, the actual like plot is razor thin, but you believe them. Like she's like, oh, before I go to college, I want to like meet my dad. I want to, before I take this next step in my life, I want to, close the chapter on the old, when she actually goes to visit her dad, she was like, I just need to know one question. Why did you leave? You know what I mean? Like ultimately she just wants answers. She just wants a closure. So you understand why she's being so stubborn about it. And then you believe, Stallone, that Rambo, that he cares about her, you know what I mean? So he's going to do everything he needs to do. And I do actually like the concept that he gets beat up and stuff, because it's just something that just makes him not feel like a superhero. Like John Wick, I feel like, is the only movie character in history where it's like, if he's killing people and not getting hurt, you really don't care, because he's just so much fun and the choreography is so great. Whereas like any other character, you kind of need that, that humanity, that leveling out, and balance it out, because you need to feel like there's stakes. Like honestly, because it's titled Last Blood, I'm like, hey, if he dies at any point, I won't be surprised. So like the fact that he's getting beat up, like it really adds layers to the story and everything. So it's still like only a 3-star movie for me, but it was like teeter 1 to 2 star the first time I watched it. Like I almost hated it, but I had no context of story, and honestly, I really don't think I was paying attention. Like if we're being honest, because when I was watching, I was like, I don't really remember any of this Mexico storyline about her going to
right.
I don't remember any of that, so I don't know if it just been 2.5 years since I'd seen it, or if I really wasn't paying attention. But I liked it, and it's well shot. Like it's nothing fancy, but like it looks good. So I mean that helps to it. At least it's not ugly and shaky cam. Like it's really not that. So especially I just seen the 355 in real life, 22 release. So shaky cam definitely would. I've had PTSD for that. So I'm glad
Yeah,
I have that. So
yeah.
I give it credit the fact that it's trying to do a little bit. It's trying to do something different. So it's not repetitive. It's not constantly Die Hard just redoing itself. I give it respect that it tried to mix it up a little bit. And like I said, I think that this is the point where in my life, I'm like, hey, Stallone's my guy, because at this point, I'm just buying what he's doing, and it works for me. I don't think it's great because the plot is completely thin. You really don't have much depth and reasoning but you kind of believe it in the performances and then just in the
Mhm.
surface level of writing. So, it's not, like you said, not a masterclass in cinema, but I had a fun time with it and I connected with it more than I did 2 and 3. So that's why it's my number 3. Uh,
Okay, fair
anything you want
enough.
to add to that, or do you want to move on to your
No,
number?
I mean, like I said, just to me, it feels the least like a Rambo movie and just the
Yeah.
most unnecessary. That's all, just the most kind of tacked on. I feel like this is one that if you're a diehard fan, you can watch, but to me, I think you can stop after the fourth one, and I think you'd be totally fine.
Oh yeah,
And yeah,
absolutely.
to where it's
I do
it's
agree
more
with
of like
that.
it's more of like an encore story. If you want to see where he's at, and again, it's kind of like, if you're a diehard Rocky fan and you want to stop with Rocky Balboa, thinking that that's his last fight, that's his last like getting the beast out of him, and then like if you want to check in on Rocky with the Creed movies and just see what he's up to, those movies are there, because they're not his movies, but like it's still nice to kind of check in on the character, see where he's at, what he's got going on, where he is in his mindset, all that kind of stuff. So, it's an okay addendum. I just think like to me, it's kind of take it or leave it. That's just all it is. You know what I mean? So
And that's
maybe
fair.
depending on what
So
mood it
now,
is.
now we're
Yeah.
at the top half of your list. What's your number 3?
Okay, so my number three is one you touched on earlier. That's First Blood Part Two. First Blood Part Two is my number three, and to me, I rewatched this one a few days ago, and I'm glad I did because I had only remembered pieces of it. This is the one I had been the longest since I'd seen start to finish. But like this one just jumped me from the beginning. I really like him being kind of locked. It really is a continuation of First Blood because he's locked up in this kind of labor camp sort of thing. Literally
Yeah.
turning big rocks into little rocks, which sucks. But he did some crazy things in First Blood. He has to be locked up. So taking over a town and fighting the National Guard, you're gonna get locked up. And Troutman, having this mission for him, this opportunity, and he trusts Troutman, which you feel in this one. That's the only person he trusts, and he always has this distrust of the other people, the other bureaucrats, the other guys. He never knows what their motives are, and even though he has those suspicions, he's going into this mission to get his boys, because he has that mentality of you don't leave a fellow soldier behind. And when he finds out that there are fellow soldiers that have been left behind, or at least they think have been left behind, he's all in on doing everything he can to do it, even though the juxtaposition of uh, the setup being they just wanted to take pictures, do recon, things like that, and he's like, no, I'm going to take these into my own hands. I'm going to save these dudes if I can. But yeah, I just liked all the flashbacks to Vietnam, the fact that he gets captured, he's back in that situation. You can see it in his eyes where he's just like, I can't believe I'm back in this thing again, because he was captured in real life in Vietnam and he was a POW for a little while. And just all this stuff, I think, just blends really well. And then when you get to the action, I think it has some of the best stealth stuff in the series, as far as him, doing the stuff where he's hiding in the mud and you don't see him until he opens his eyes, and and he just pops out of the side. He's carving dudes up with his knife, and the exploding arrows are just a lot of fun. And him, fighting helicopters, it gets into all that crazy stuff, obviously in the second half. But I think it has a nice progression, a nice build towards that. It's just, again, we talk about First Blood Part Two as kind of the type of movie people think of when they think of the Rambo series, but I think for a good reason, because it's one of the better examples of it. And and granted, the story is kind of somewhat surface level, which is why it's mid-tier Rambo for me. There's a little bit of depth you can dig in there, but not as much as some of the other films. But I still think it's fairly well done, and I just kind of like the natural progression of it. It's an hour and 40 minutes or so. You're you're out, you do your thing, you get out, and it's pretty good. It really played well for me on this rewatch, especially. I'm glad I did. Like I just thought it was pretty entertaining overall. I really liked it.
Well, that gives me hope because, like I said, that's the only one that's technically negative on my list. So whenever we're doing a franchise ranking or a
Mhm.
filmography ranking, if there's only one negative, it either bums me out because it's like, oh man, actually like the rest of them, or it gives me hope that I can change my mind, even if it's more of a guilty pleasure. Wink, wink. Check out Tournament Fights Guilty Pleasures over on the Movie Hero Network. Even if it's like a guilty pleasure where I'm like, I'll bump it up to 3 just because I like the franchise.
I mean, we can go talk about Vice Squad for a little bit if you want to, but
No, we'll save
okay,
that
never mind.
we'll save that
Yeah.
for your redo of your top 64 because
Yeah,
apparently it's going to
right.
be on there next year. But yeah, so Rambo First Blood Part 2, it's one of those where it's like it could bump up for me. Like I'm not saying it'll jump 3 technically because I really did have a lot of
Sure.
dumb fun with 3, but even if it bumps up into the positive ring, that at least gives me hope that there's a chance that on rewatch that could do that for me. So,
I think if you play this back to back with First Blood, it would actually be a nice little double feature because they're so
I had them
different,
separated.
but they flow well because it literally is a continuation. I mean, it jumps into where he's at after First Blood, and the fact that it's like it would be the two examples of like what Rambo is, like the character in this one movie versus the character kind of what he became. But I think if you were to watch him back to back, it'd be pretty fun actually, and it would kind of flow well and work. So. But that's just me. But still, it's not my favorite Rambo film, obviously. But it's right in there. So yeah.
All right, so I'm actually curious on how this is going to go because I know your opinion on one of these, and we actually technically
Yeah.
haven't talked about the other one. So
Mhm.
I'm going to let you go. And what's your number 2?
Oh, but I just win. Isn't it your turn?
I
I don't know.
wanted to put the
He wants to
pressure.
know. He wants to know. He wants to know. Okay. My number 2 is First Blood.
I
First
had
Blood
a
is number
feeling
2.
that's why I put the
Yeah,
pressure on
yeah.
you.
So I figured it might be a hot take again, but hey, this show is all about hot takes because what would you expect from me at this point? You know what I mean? But listen, you know how much I love the 2008 one, so we'll get into that in a
Exactly.
little bit. But I have a side special reason why I connected that one so much. I'll tell you when we get there. But First Blood again, it's the most non Rambo movie, if that makes sense. Like it's not what you think it is. Like you said, the first time you watched it, how you kind of didn't know what to expect, and you expected the machine guns and the explosions and the helicopters, and it's definitely not that. It's literally just this story of this dude, this drifter, coming back from Vietnam, just kind of wandering aimlessly, not knowing his place in the world, and just getting harassed by Brian Dennehy, just how kind of the sentiments were, at least to some of the soldiers, by some of the people at the time, coming back from Vietnam, how they were seen as baby killers and killing civilians, things like that. And Rambo knows he's not that. He was always a stick to the mission type of guy, and feels like he's being disrespected. And the fact that it just kind of blows up to the degree that it does, where he's getting run off, and he fights back. He blows up, he explodes, he goes into war mode in this little kind of small town in these mountains, and just kind of goes crazy. But they end up creating a monster, or reawakening something inside of him, and it's really interesting to see the progression of that, as far as even the little moments where he just, when he encounters the National Guard guys, he's not trying to kill them off or do anything. He's just like, back off, like, give it up, like, just leave. Just get out of here, just leave me alone. Like, he just wants to be left alone. For God's sakes, he just wanted something to eat, Henry. All he wanted was some damn food. You could just let the guy go to the diner and get a hamburger. Like, what's the matter with y'all? Like, he just wanted some food, and he was gonna move on to the next town. Like,
Well,
no big deal.
and even worse, he just wanted to see his friend too. You know what I mean? So when he got the news,
Yeah, he just wants to
like,
see his buddy. He wants to see his friend. He just wants to live his life and just move on. He's just a drifter. He just wants to do his thing, and the fact that you harass this guy to the point where he just completely snaps, he ends up like destroying half of this town and just going absolutely bonkers. But at the same time, his final kind of speech when Troutman's finally gets him alone in the building, and he's saying that nothing is over, you just don't turn it off. Like that clicks for a lot of people in the military. Like, they come back from these wars, and it's like, that's the definition of PTSD. You just can't turn it off like some switch, like it's always
into
there.
your brain. Like, whenever something happens, your instinct, like a lot of people, their instinct is to breathe and to walk and to talk.
Mhm.
soldiers, their instinct is to be defensive, to fight back, to have a
Mhm.
strategy, have be combative, and it's like that sucks because it's like when you
Yeah.
get into the real world, that's not how the real world works, and that's so it I feel like that's why I appreciated this one. It's my number one. That's why I appreciated this
Mhm.
one.
I figured it was. Yeah.
More on rewatches because like it has the slow start, but that's building up to the world. It's not just the character; it's
Mhm.
building up the world and how the world is kind of like regular. You know what I mean? But he's
Mhm.
not, and you kind of have to have that
He
chill.
never will be regular. That's what
Exactly.
the franchise is about.
Yeah.
He's never regular, and that's what I'll talk a little bit about more that in the next one. It's like he'll never be regular, and there's even another great moment as far as the you can't turn it off switch, but also there's a part where he finally breaks down. He's leaning up against the thing, and he just says, "I'm so alone." Like
Yeah.
that's just so devastating, like he's like, I'm so alone. Like he literally has nothing. Like he has nobody. And I think Troutman's the only person he really does have because Troutman's the only guy who gets what he's saying, who understands, this guy, and he knows that he can't switch it off, and he knows that he's not trying to be this monster, this killer, in regular life. He just knows that this guy was born and bred for war, and he can't ever go back to being a normal person again. And it just, and the fact that that's a tragic figure. He can't go back to just living a normal life. Like he is born and bred in war, and it's part of his soul now.
And I think this specific story, it also helps that it's based on the book, so it's kind of
Hmm.
grounded in for that. But I feel like this a specific type of story, whether it's made today or made in the 2000s or whatever, like
Hmm.
with this general plot, that it would have had Troutman be like the evil genius behind the scenes, where he's like, I'm going to recruit him to do my evil doings, and now
Yeah, right.
Troutman ends up being the ultimate bad guy. You know what I mean? And I feel like I
Hmm.
really like that. At the end of the day, like you really don't know how to trust Troutman, so it does a good job of kind of like directing every scene with him, where it's like, is he trying to turn him? Is he trying to like
Hmm.
cover up for like the military, where his PTSD now we want to kind of like brush it under the rug and get rid of him and kind of hide the story. It does a good job of setting all that up because Troutman, he's kind of ambiguous for like the first 30
You don't know
minutes.
if he's going to turn Rambo onto these local guys
Exactly.
and
You don't know,
show
is
him
he
what
going to
he.
get him
Hey,
under
oh, you want
control?
to
Yeah.
you want to see what my guys can do? I'll show you what he can
Yeah.
do. And I'll turn him loose on you guys. Like, I mean, he has the line about you better bring a good supply of body bags, which
That's
is
just
a
being
great line.
honest.
But
That's not a
he's
threat.
just
That's
being
just
honest. He's like, you keep pushing this guy, and some shit's going to go down. Like and you're not going to like what's going to happen. Like I'm just telling you what this guy is capable of. That he's the best of the best, and I know that because I trained the motherfucker. I trained him, and
It
he's the
reminds me of the
best.
scene in Matrix when we first see Agent Smith. He's like, "My officer is going to get him." No, your officers are already dead. And
Your
that's what
officer
Troutman.
already dead,
He's like,
sir.
"No,
Yeah, yeah.
your guys don't
No,
stand a
your
chance,
boys
buddy."
have no chance. No, your local yokel National Guard boy who did a couple weeks training ain't got shit on this guy.
Yeah, and
Like this dude
the
knows
reason
guerrilla warfare.
and the reason why it also like works for me on rewatch is because like
Mm.
the fact that he only I think he only kills one person the entire movie. And it's like an accident or whatever. I remember. I don't remember.
It's the helicopter accident because
Yeah,
and that's all it is. But he doesn't do anything intentionally. The guy
yeah,
like missteers the thing or
yeah.
something, or he hits like a
But
tree
but
or
he but
something.
he sets he sets up
It's not a
his
thing. Yeah.
trap and just his
Hmm.
fighting, tactics to be, just wound, not to
Hmm.
fatally, take him out, but just to wound him and just kind of like get him out of the way. And I feel like that's even more impressive because you can easily kill someone when you're trained to kill.
Hmm.
But if you're trained to, if you're able to injure this many people and still pretty much be unharmed the entire time, like he's tired, but he's really
Oh
not
yeah.
injured like for this most of the movie. Like he does a good job of like
Hmm.
John Wicking it, but like in a like a taekwondo type of deal, not a
Hmm.
deadly force. So it's like that's so interesting for the character. That's just how well trained he is. That he's able to like
Hmm.
control the situation and really not, he's got moments where he's like, oh, I don't really know if I'm going to get out of this, but for the and that's really him
Hmm.
being backed into the corner, not necessarily who he's up against. And like I said, by the end, when he has that breakdown, it kind of culminates by the end where it's like, all right, this is what we're getting at. And I really feel like that
Hmm.
hit on the second rewatch because at that point I was kind of like checked out on the first time I saw it, where I'm like, oh, now,
Right.
now he's being a whiny little brat. But it's like, no,
Hmm.
I totally got it on the rewatch. So I'm
Hmm.
really glad I revisited it. And like, don't
Yeah,
get me wrong,
and no, most people get it on the second
yeah,
watch because again, you go into the first one thinking it's Rambo,
yeah,
like that's what you're gonna get is a Rambo, run and gun Rambo, and like it's no, it's more of this character study in a survival situation, which is more of what the movie actually is. It's not this crazy action movie. It's just like this survival story of this guy, pushed too far. And yeah, and then after you get that out of the way, and then you reevaluate the movie and you go, okay, well, let me put my brain in the right context to go back and rewatch it and know that going in, and it really works as that character study and like this, analyzing this guy.
So I have two weird comparisons, but I think I've seen them generally around the same time. But Inglourious Basterds and Drive are two movies that when I first watched them, I wasn't the biggest fan of, because I was expecting a full-fledged war movie with Inglourious Basterds, and I was expecting a Fast and Furious Baby Driver type of movie.
You're like that lady who sued the company that made Drive because she thought it was Fast and Furious because of the marketing, and when she didn't get a dude driving around, outrunning everybody and some action movie, she was mad.
We'll go that far, but yes. It's
right.
A similar
That's
vein.
a true story.
Yes.
Some lady sued the company for the marketing company because they marketed the film wrong.
And that's the crazy thing about like film in general, where you set up expectations. Yeah. Trailers have to pitch a movie to get butts in seats, and then just hope that the story itself, keeps you there. But unfortunately, a lot of times, and that happens with like independent horror movies, where you don't really show off that slow burn. And this is a great example of like, if you haven't, obviously, if you're watching this video, you're probably a fan of the franchise, so you probably have given it a second chance, and you share a similar thought as we do. But if for some reason you stumble upon this, or you're just a fan of the channel and you wanted to hear our thoughts, and you only seen it once or haven't seen it because you didn't know what to expect, go in with that mindset, whether on first watch or second watch, and really analyze the character of John Rambo, and go in with the PTSD mindset, go in with the not trying to kill mindset, and go in just with realizing Stallone is trying to like separate himself from Rocky. And I really do think like he does a good job. Obviously, it's not on par with Rocky for me in terms of like overall franchise, but I will say I rewatched him and watched some of the movies for the first time and rewatched others, and I am happy I did so. So, I have hopes for two.
Hey, he had a couple of movies that came out the same year as Rocky. I mean, this one came out the same year as Rocky 3. Rambo 2 came out the same year as Rocky 5 or Rocky 4, excuse me. So, I mean, you had your choice some of those years, Rocky or Rambo, and luckily we like both of them. But I think most general audiences overall were more familiar and picked Rocky at the time and didn't know what Rambo was, as they do now. But yeah, I mean, it's a totally different character than Rocky, but for a good reason. And it's a whole different thing. Yeah, I don't see Rocky Balboa running around the jungle, surviving. And
he'll run around, Russian snowstorms, but he won't.
Yeah. Didn't do that.
So, as I segue into your number one, I will admit Rambo is one of the coolest character names of all time. It's just an awesome name.
It's cool,
man. And speaking of Rambo, your number one is
Rambo. That weird thing they do where they jump the titles all over the place. But yes, Rambo from 2008 is mine. And I think it was just because he called Rocky Balboa, in 2006. So, let's just get that. I think it was originally going to be called John Rambo, and they just shortened it up to Rambo.
It sounds cooler. Like it just sounds badass. And
yeah. So I just think this one just has literally a little bit of everything you could want in a Rambo movie. It has the slow burn build up, towards the bonkers crazy action in the last, 20 minutes. But it has, I just really like where the Rambo character is in this movie. He's just been living in this, in this village, just being like a snake handler, catching fish, but, and you have to see, does he still have that killer instinct? Does he still have that war in him? And you see him, he's still got the skills. He's still shooting fish with a bow and arrow. He's still catching snakes. He's still got the reflexes and the instincts. But when he gets this mission, not really a mission, but it's like these missionaries, asking him to take them into Burma and take them to this village. When you get that first real action scene where he he pulls the gun and takes out, you know, those pirates. Like you just go like, okay, he's still got that inside of him somewhere. And you feel that throughout the movie, where he's then contemplating all this stuff when he hears that things have gone wrong, and the fact that he has that internal monologue about, you know what you are, you know, you can't suppress it anymore, you know, this is you, no matter how much you want to try to live this loner life, you know, you are there to make a difference, you know, you're there to be the hero, you know, to you don't leave people behind, you know, he has this responsibility for these people even though he doesn't really know them that much. You know, he kind of took them into the situation, and it's on him to get them out. I like all that stuff, dude. I mean, he makes his own machete in this movie, which is awesome. You know, just blacksmithing the shit out of his own machete, you know, which is great. And him teaming up even with these, you know, brash mercenaries is a lot of fun, and them kind of discovering that he's a true badass, like he's the real deal, like he's
They're
not just
teasing
some
him the
boat
entire
man.
time too. Like
Oh,
they're
they're
really,
teasing him. He's just like, don't give me that
they just
1,000
kept
yard
calling him
stare, you
Boatman.
know? Yeah, boat man. What are you gonna do, boat man? You know, you're not coming with us, boat man. Stay with the boat man. You know, all this stuff. And it's just
That's
like
a nice
you
way to
just
call him bitch boy. That's what
well,
they're
and
really
again,
getting at.
because you know who he is, we know who he is. You know, these guys don't know who he is, and when he comes out and he starts kicking ass with that bow and arrow, and he does the bow into the one guy's head, and he falls over into the landmine and blows up. You're just like, all right, now shit's on. Now we got a fucking Rambo movie. Like now we're ready to roll, and it goes from that to him doing his stealth stuff that he does so well, you know, like running around in the dark, you know, doing his thing. Like you get that stuff, you get Rambo on the run, and then man, you just get the most crazy bonkers last 20 minutes you could possibly want in a Rambo movie, with him just kicking ass on a 50 cal and gutting dudes from, you know, from the abdomen, you know, just spilling blood, chopping heads off. I mean, it's just, I just have a smile on my face the whole time. But you know, and to me, it just, you could almost say it's the best action movie of the 2000s. But you know, if you wanted to make an argument for that, but
You might
that's neither
lose.
here nor there. But on a more serious note, um, the connection I was talking about that I have to this movie is the church that I used to attend back in Jacksonville, Southside Baptist Church, had a Karen ministry, which Karen is the Burmese, Myanmar people, you know, who live there, and they had a segment of them. They're called the Karen people. So this movie, that's what this movie is about. It's about the Karen rebels standing up against the military coup that kind of took over that country, you know, and fighting against this you know, military regime that kind of took over everything. And the fact that this movie was literally banned in that country because of the fact that it was like an inspirational movie, you know, for the people to fight back. So, you know, I have a connection to it because we had a segment of Karen people in that church. It was the Karen ministry. So, you know, it kind of clicks on that level, and the movie came out around the time that they were there. So, you know, it just, to me, it all kind of culminates to it's become my favorite. It's the one I've gone back to and watched the most. I just think the movie, it kicks ass, but it also has a little something to say on the side. So yeah, I just really like it. I
To
like
give
it
it
a
a
lot.
little context, it's my number two, and the reason my number
Mm-hmm.
two is because everything that you just said right now, you can't deny. Like, it's so much fun and it's
Mm-hmm.
over the top, but like it's grounded at the same time. But
Yeah.
I will have the caveat where it's like I didn't rewatch it because, you know, I've watched it, you know, I studied
Oh,
it
sure.
a
You
little
watched it
bit.
recently,
Yeah, yeah.
so
So I
yeah,
didn't
yeah.
rewatch it, so I can't say my opinions changed, but I had a good opinion on it. But with that said, I went in the entire time trying to like beat it up and, like, you know what I mean. So a
You
lot of my
can't beat
memories
it
are
up.
like, all right, what's the first thing I think of? Oh, the mercenaries are annoying. No, no, no. I'm trying to be positive. I'm kind of positive. You know what I mean? It's like
Mm-hmm.
shit like that where it's like, no, no, no. So it's like
Mm-hmm.
I will admit that. But with that said, they're just like, if I, you know, how I do on everything, if I'm trying to distinguish, you know, separate my rankings and stuff. When I think of this in one and two, it's just I don't like the cops in First Blood, obviously, because they're cocks,
Mm-hmm.
but like they're meant to be. Whereas in this one, the mercenaries, what it separates, and I will say, you know, I'll be honest on this one. I use this in my argument when we did our debate, but like on in contrast to like Predator, where it's like, you know, you have your mercenaries who are in your group,
Mm-hmm.
they have characteristics that are memorable and like you like them for that. This one, they're meant to kind of like doubt Rambo, and it's fun, don't get me wrong, because of like the low-key, like, you know, we know something they don't know. But when it comes to like after the movie's over, I don't think of the mercenaries as much, but and which wouldn't be as a big a deal if they weren't in a lot of the movie. So like, it's not necessarily a flaw per se, but if I'm trying to compare this and First Blood for like my 1 and 2 and like where I really want to rank it within the franchise, I have to distinguish the difference where it's like I don't connect with the mercenary.
Well, they're expendable in the movie because they're not the protagonist like in
Which
Predator.
fair,
The mercenary team with Schwarzenegger are the protagonists of the film. So you get to know them because they are a team.
but
You
the
know,
difference,
the mercenaries are a team themselves, but they're separate from Rambo, who we're with. You know, like we don't care as much about them, so we get like the bare minimum characteristics to separate. And to be fair, the one like Australian guy or whatever, he's really the only one that's like antagonistic or like kind of an asshole. And like the
and
other ones are just kind of chilling.
yeah,
So
and
like
he's
they're
the
just
most
doing their thing.
memorable for better or for worse. And
Mm.
I feel like
Yeah,
that's,
yeah.
if I'm nitpicking though, it's one of those where it's like, it just keeps it down from like, like Predators and
Mm.
I hate comparing, but it's just, similar in this vein where it's like Predators an all-timer for me. So because I remember more than just Schwarzenegger and the Predator. I remember the crew, whereas in this one I don't, and the only one I do remember, he's kind of annoying. And Rita from Dexter, she's in this movie, so it's always nice to see her. But like, I did like the fact that, she's kind of a badass and she's like, no, you're gonna take us, like this is what we're doing, I'll die, this is for the cause. And I respected that, but then we're like away from her for a lot of the time, so they built it up to like really have that, and then you just don't, it doesn't like full-fledged go into it. So like, this on a first watch, this is a high 3-star for me, borderline 4-star. So I feel like it could go up on 4-star just because I have a lot of fun with it. So unfortunately, First Blood's the only one that is a 4-star for me. None of them are favorites. Like I said, it's not like a favorite franchise, but I do enjoy it. So, but it's a high 3-star. Like if I rewatch this with my dad or like one of my buddies and we're just having a fun, like let's just watch some fuck shit up type of movie, then it could go up because of the experience. But just on a solo, like, hey, how am I going to analyze this film? It just didn't live up as much as I would want to in my quote unquote second favorite of the franchise. So like I said, if I'm just like, picking at like, why am I, ranking it the way I'm ranking? I feel
Totally.
that's just how I roll. So it's one of those where it's like, I don't dislike the movie by any means. Even when I went in, like I was nervous when I was prepping for a debate. I'm like, man, there's a lot of good about this movie. And there, you know what I mean? There's a lot of ammo, no pun intended, to build up this movie and why it's a fun one. And it made me want to give First Blood another chance, and it wanted me to watch the other one. So I give it a lot of credit, and no complaints from me. The fact that this is your number one, I totally understood.
And to me, again, when we talk about the ending of this one, which is what I alluded to earlier, of just him finally like deciding to go home to Arizona, and just walking home, and he gets to like the farm thing, I guess, that we would later see in Last Blood. But to me, and you see the Rambo name on the mailbox, that he's finally just going home and finally setting, because he'd been running his whole life, like basically since he got out of the war, and he had never actually, decided to just go home. Like I just thought that was a perfect ending. He's finally at that mindset he needs to be at to just settle down and give up war and go home. Like I thought you could have just ended the series right there. They hit the music and it's just like a perfect ending. And that's why I just thought like Last Blood was just unnecessary, because like you didn't need that.
I'll fight back a little bit on that. So the reason why Last Blood connected with me a little bit more is because of the fact where it said it set it up in Rambo, and then it said, well, technically in all of them where he's like forced into all these situations. So like in Rambo, he had compassion. He's actually doing it kind of like for his his insides. He's like, I want to do it for these people. I don't have to do it for these people. I want to help these people.
Yeah.
So it kind of adds on in Last Blood, whereas like, you don't have the backstory of the family aspect of it, but you believe that the family aspect is there. So like, it's one of those where this girl forces him into the situation, but because he loves her so much like a daughter, that he's going to go out of his way to, be Rambo again. Like he technically wanted to drift off into the wind, Thanos style, on his farm, but unfortunately this girl forced his hand and he had to save, and it actually had the balls to like kill her. So like, I really do like that. So I feel like Last Blood, this similar to what you're saying with First Blood and First Blood Part 2. I don't know if you watch the Last Blood and Rambo back to back, but I would actually think it might be fun because you're going, you're like, oh no, he sends off. He's like, oh, he is happy. Maybe this is, the passing the torch, and maybe he's gonna train somebody or whatever. And it's like, no, he's just forced in the situation. And I feel like did you watch them back to back or no?
No, I did when I rewatched him a while back, because I watched 2008 Rambo before I went and saw Last Blood in the theater. Okay. So like I did do that before I saw Last Blood in the theater, because I just wanted to get refamiliar, with where he was at the time. So when it picked up at the farm, I was like, okay, that makes sense, because that's where the other one leaves off in kind of the end credits. So yeah, no, I have seen it as that, like before I saw it in the theater. Yeah, totally.
Okay, so yeah, like I said, it just I don't know, it worked for me a little bit more, and I feel like that's just me as I get older. And since I'm not really a big action guy, like if you look at
Mhm.
like my favorite movies, there's some there, but like there's a sci-fi element or there's a compassion element or whatever. So like I feel like this
Mhm.
one connected a little bit better on rewatch because it had that emotional
Mhm.
connection and it really gave
Yeah.
Rambo some humanity, which he was starting to lack through his PTSD. He was like mindlessly, I'm just I'm a robot, and then he started to grow
Mhm.
and develop, and I give it credit for
Yeah.
that. So, since there's only 5 movies, I'm actually going. I have a coin. I'm gonna do the coin idea so we can rank these because
Mm.
that's always fun to
Oh
do.
boy.
It's
Yeah.
actually an Action Army coin. When I met Bateman, he gave me this. So one
Oh,
side,
I have one of those. I have one of those somewhere on my nightstand. Yeah, I
yeah.
have one too. Mhm.
Fun fact, real quick, just when the Schmodown came to Chicago, I was standing in line for Mark Ellis's stand up, and Bateman comes out and he looked at me, he's like, Sanchez, and I was like, yeah, and then we just shot the shit for a little bit. He's like, hey, you can have this, you know what I mean? It's like, I was like, hell yeah. So it's,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
it's nice, to have people recognize you. So this coin's just been in my wallet for the last almost 3 full years now at this point. So with
Sure,
that
yeah.
said, so I'll take Bateman and you could take Guy. So before that, number 5
Mhm.
is Rambo 3. I feel like because
Mhm.
it was
Yeah, yeah.
both at number 4, so it kind of brought the weight down. So just a reminder, Rambo First Blood Part 2 was my number 5, but that was your number 3, and then Last Blood
3.
was your number 5 and my number 3. So with that said,
Mhm.
I'm gonna flip the coin.
We
If it
gotta
lands,
flip it for number 4. Yeah,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
right.
So whoever it
Yeah.
lands on, that's who gets the higher seed. So
I
Bateman
see.
is gonna be Last Blood. Guy will be Part 2
Part
First
2.
Blood. So
Mhm.
I'm gonna flip it, and it is Guy. So
Guy.
the internet
So
wins here. So
so
number
Last
4.
Blood Last Blood takes number 4 and part 2 takes number 3. And
Yes,
then do we flip again for the top spot?
that is exactly what we're gonna do.
Yeah. So Guy for 2008 and Bateman for First Blood, I guess, right?
Yep. All
All
right.
right,
So
same
the
thing.
number 1 Rambo movie is going
All
to
right.
be who is it? It is
There it is.
where's the light?
Mhm.
Oh man, there's no light. I'm just gonna have to be honest. Yeah, it's Bateman, First Blood.
Bayman. All right. No, that's fine. Yeah, and you that one's more in line with the internet as well. I'm the outlier
I
in
mean,
putting
honestly,
2008.
if
So
you
yeah.
really think about it, the fact that Rambo 3 is last and Last Blood's a 4, I feel like that's not as way off as the
It's not
internet
too
might
far
think.
off of like the most of the internet, yeah, is concerned, and most of the internet considers First Blood, the best actual Rambo movie. But I feel like word has also come around on 2008 Rambo. Like it got kind of mixed at the time,
Yeah.
but I think it's got people kind of come around on that one too. And yeah,
Honestly,
and
that's
part
kind of the
two.
storyline for the entire
Well,
franchise.
and part 2 is perfect in the middle because there's a lot of people who like it, and there's some people like you who maybe don't connect to it as much and think it's a little too over the top and not kind of off the path. So it's kind of a perfect one because the internet's kind of always been split on that one, and it's like, why did James Cameron write this movie? That's weird. But yeah, so
Ladies.
it's either way,
Yeah.
but it's one of those ones that people either click with it or they don't. It's probably the most divisive one of the whole series actually. So people either roll with it or they don't. So it's kind of perfect right at number 3.
There you go.
Yeah.
So to officially say the number, let's
Mm.
rank stuff. Episode 5, the Rambo franchise. Number 5 is
Mm-hmm.
Rambo 3. Number 4 is Rambo
Last
Last Blood.
Blood.
Number 3 is First Blood Part 2. Number 2 is Rambo
Rambo
2008. And the number 1 Rambo movie within the franchise,
is
as by
First
us and our
Blood.
coin, is First Blood.
First
So
Blood.
yeah. So anybody who watches this on a review, give us your ranking down below. You don't have to worry about straining your arms, your fingers.
Mm-hmm.
It's only
It's
5
only
that you
5
need to pick
movies.
out. So
Yeah.
go ahead and
Unless
give
you
us.
want to rank the cartoon series, Freedom Begins from 1986, the Rambo cartoon series that people forget exists,
Didn't know it
which
existed.
I'm pretty solid. It would be number 6. I'm pretty sure about that. It's very strange. It came out around the time as GI Joe, so it's very GI Joe, like rah rah America, middle of the
Did
Cold
not
War
know
kind
it
of stuff.
existed.
Just it's not good, but there is clips and random episodes on YouTube. If you're curious, there was a Rambo cartoon series, which makes about as much sense as the RoboCop cartoon series.
There was
It's like you take
65
this.
episodes, so I did not know that. That is wild.
Yeah, it's something. I mean, if you're curious, yeah, and having these rated R franchises with these cartoons just makes no sense
With
at
the
all.
rating of TVY7, so whatever.
Oh yeah. Oh, for 7-year-olds, yeah, go ahead and watch the Rambo cartoon. You're fine,
One
7-year-olds.
of the pictures
Pop
is
that
literally
thing on.
look at this picture. He's literally
Yeah.
holding a rocket launcher. So
I know. Yeah, 7-year-olds. Yeah, no problem. It was
and
the
that's
80s,
and that
man. What are you gonna
and
do?
that's why today's kids are a lot different than today's adults.
Yeah,
Because
a Paw Patrol. It is not. I'll say that.
it is not.
No.
So with that said, if you made it this far in the video on the rewatch, make sure you give it a like, because obviously you did so. And if for some reason you are just a big Rambo fan and you stumbled upon the channel, might as well subscribe, because we do stuff like this for different. We try and alternate filmographies and franchises. Next week we're doing Fincher. The following week we're doing Alien versus Predator, and then the following week we're doing Edgar Wright, if I recall, right. So
yeah, Edgar Wright. Now that Last Night in Soho is out on Blu-ray and digital and everything, so because I need a chance to rewatch it. I saw it in the theater. I just want to rewatch it one more time before I give those rankings. You know
absolutely.
what I mean?
So
put it in the Edgar Wright.
that's what we do here.
intro.
We try and have a lot of fun,
Mhm.
and we try and rank stuff, and we like to talk about movies. So this is our chance to do it. So like I said, if you made this far in the video, you might as well like it. Comment below your ranking of the franchise, and also your favorite non-franchise Sylvester Stallone performance, because that's a fun one, because clearly he's one of our favorite actors, so we like to hear opinions on that. And yeah, so can't wait for next week for David Fincher, and the following week for Alien vs. Predator. I am Henry Confidential. That is Austin Pez Howell. I plugged earlier his other channel he's on.
Tournament fights, tier ranker fights. Just look those up, and yeah, you're going to want to check those out and subscribe, because we're doing Henry's top 64 tournament fights. We're going to throw his 64 into the randomized March Madness bracket and determine his new favorite movie, not his real. I know what his real number one is. We'll see what his number one is after this episode.
And I will watch this tonight. So that is going to be fun. So
oh, you don't have to, but it's just a running
will.
joke we have. It's like, your prize for winning is you got to go watch that movie right now.
And I will do it. So I will have a couple.
Yeah.
I will do that.
Fair
so
enough.
With that said, Henry Confidential, Austin Pez Howell. This is where we come to rank stuff. Later, guys.